ensuring democracy. And we cannot go back to autocracy, where an individual then stands up and says, I am now declaring a constitutional guarantee illegal. You can't have that. You can't have that, not in Kenya, not today, not tomorrow, and we won't go back to those days where, you just decide as the police, I am not going to allow this to happen. We are required to notify you, and that is the law. We notify you. We don't ask for your permission, because this is a right we've been given already by the Constitution. So we are not requesting, when people go out to the streets, we are not requesting the police to allow us to protest, to allow us to demonstrate. No way. We are notifying you so that you can take the necessary precaution to ensure that those protests are within, peaceful limits. You guard property. You guard, by the roadside. When you go and you stand right in front of protesters, what do you expect? So these are issues that I believe the police service will need to interrogate. And as civil society, we want to offer support, we want to offer assistance, because we know that the security and the police are an important institution that we need to quote-unquote democratize. Because when you democratize security, then we will be in a different place altogether. So we have to democratize, we have to let the security know how to operate in a democratic setup, so that they understand the issues beforehand, so that they can work with the people to ensure that democracy thrives, to ensure that constitutionalism thrives, and to ensure that the rule of law thrives in our country.
Certainly, let's take a look. This is Outer Ring Road, live on your screens. The situation seems to have calmed down considerably from where it was a few moments ago. Our team now behind the police line. That scene earlier on was awash with tear gas. We can see that there's some water on the road as well, possibly from the water cannon trucks used to keep the protesters at bay. Outer Ring Road a bit earlier on in the day had a heavy police presence, still the case now, to avert the Azimio team from making their way down. That was one of the routes they intended to use as they were making their way to the CBD. But again, live pictures, police still engaging a few protesters. The crowd certainly not as big as we saw earlier when they breached that police barricade. But this now, of course, seeming to de-escalate a bit. We can still see the water cannon still engaging, the tear gas also being lobbed at, well, we can't see any protesters right now, but being lobbed nonetheless. And of course, they are trying to disperse the crowd a bit earlier on. Live pictures of Outer Ring Road. Gatete Njoroge has been there following the situation as it developed and unfolded from earlier this afternoon. We're heading to 5 p.m. Now, unfortunately, we can't get closer because of the effects of the tear gas, but you did see some of the water cannon trucks spraying, we believe, a crowd of protesters on the other side of the road. We assume they're trying to keep that road as clear as possible as they disperse the protesters or keep them at bay, because right now that crowd is unable to gather with the current conditions, as you can see. A bit earlier on, we were following the convoy as well, the Azimio convoy that had made its way to Ngong Road, if I'm not mistaken. We'll also check in with Stephen Latour to let us know where they are at the moment. But right now, these are the scenes along Outer Ring Road. Tear gas, water cannons, police presence. Okay, and it appears there is, well, that seems to be one of the tear gas launchers that was activated there. Police also heading back to the middle and the center of the road. And this is the situation as they try to bring calm, or at least de-escalate the situation from where it was moments ago. But again, this is what we were talking about earlier, Hussein and Christine, that this will be the continuous until both sides that seem completely, well, at least one side, completely averse to talking and having that peaceable agreement. To the left of your screen, that is the Azimio convoy. They appear to have stopped. We'll give you the exact location of where they are in a few moments. But, you know, Christine, when you hear one side say, look, yes, we understand the demonstrations. We get you do have that constitutional right to do so, but this appears to be a trend. Whenever you lose elections, to go this route, once other avenues have been closed. And we've heard the deputy president on several occasions say, this is simply an attempt to blackmail President Ruto to join government. It appeared to have worked in 2017, and in 2018 we saw the handshake happen. But, you know, what do you make of that this tends to kind of be that trend that shows up?
Thank you. And as I come to that, you know, as you were speaking and we were watching the scenes, I kept wondering to myself what the tactic of the security forces is here. Whether we're protecting property, or protecting lives, or suppressing people. You know, when we take stock of what's going on with this protest, there's so much to unpack. And unfortunately, coming from a place where we've already been making so much progress, informed a lot by post-2007, the Waki Commission, the Kriegler Commission, lots of recommendations that gave life to very important bodies such as the National Police Service Commission, the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, setting the Office of the Inspector General as an independent office within the Constitution that should not be at the beckon or whims and call of, you know, of any office.
Right. Hold that thought, Christine. This is a moving and ever-changing scene that we have to speak to. Back onto Outer Ring Road now. So once the police appear to have pulled back, protesters back on the road in their numbers. You can see a cloud of tear gas smoke behind them. Our team, as I mentioned earlier, are behind the police line. We're not sure how else the police will seek to engage. But a tear gas canister, once again, lobbed at the protesters. This is going to be the scene, like we said, until 6 or beyond, because the protesters not relenting and the police not relenting in their position. And so it will be the running battles, this back and forth between both sides. This was the crowd that had gathered a bit earlier on when the Azimio team had come through Embakasi, more specifically Imara Daima, and then of course down to Mukuru kwa Njenga and Pipeline. At that point, that is where they had to change course. Police had stopped them in their tracks, and they had to find alternative routes. At one point, Eastern Bypass, another Southern Bypass, and eventually to where they reached, which was Ngong Road, the latest update, at least that we could see. Stephen Leto has been following them, but the protesters do not seem to have been affected whatsoever by the tear gas meant to disperse them, keep them at bay. The water cannons now, you can see in the distance, are now being engaged to try and keep the protesters at bay. But they have kept their position right there on the road. Where they will head from here, it is not clear, as the Azimio team has already left that particular area where they were addressing them. But I'm sure you want to say something, Hussein. Go ahead.
I think, for me, you're very right. The police and the protesters are engaging each other. There is no, destruction of property or anything of that nature. For me, that's a situation you handle by pulling away the police. What would happen there if the police got into their trucks and left the scene? They'll be left to themselves. That area is their home area. They can't start vandalizing their own businesses, their own homes, and their own everything. So that's a situation where you ask yourself, you just asked, how are the police handling this? For me, why don't you just get into your trucks and leave the scene? There's no politician there. if your issue was the politicians should not engage the crowd, the politicians should not, in one way or another, quote unquote, incite. These are now the community members by themselves, and they're throwing stones and they're coming to the streets to deal with the police. So if you know you're a problem in that place, in that situation, as the police, my question is, what would happen there if the police got into their trucks and left? I don't know. I mean, as Christine said, we've not been given that opportunity to find out. But I can almost say that the situation would calm down. Because then who would the youth be engaging with? They'll be on their own.
But the police
it's not like they're warring parties.
Because they feel that's their mandate.
Yes.
It's not.
It's your mandate if there is, a threat to life, or there's even a possibility of two groups clashing. If we had one group there and the other one, and they're throwing stones at each other or they're attacking it, I would understand. The police have to be there. But here, very clearly, as you can see, they are engaging the police. And, if you are to pull out, I don't know, we can't really tell, but I believe if the police were to pull out of that situation, then there would be calm, and hopefully maybe people would just get back into their homes, go about their businesses, and, call it a day. But, they're security agencies at the end of the day, and we want to believe they have their reasons, they are trained, they understand what is happening. So maybe they know why they are there, and maybe they are there for a good reason, But as I said, it's open to everyone to interpret that situation as police contributing to what we are seeing on our television sets.
Well, some could argue that the police are well within their ambit to try to keep the situation calm. Now, again, this is what we were talking about earlier on, whether this is a chicken versus egg scenario. Was this crowd riled up because of the police presence, or had they challenged that police barricade, which then left the police with no response but to engage in the way they have? It appears a fire has been lit as well to the side of the road, as again the protesters holding to their position on Outer Ring Road. Situation has not de-escalated from what we had seen earlier, but they seem to be giving a message to the police that we are not going anywhere. It is likely these are individuals who call that area home. We can't say that for sure, and so really we have nowhere else to go but to stand their ground here. But we will be following this as well. Gatete Njoroge will be speaking to us a bit later to give us an update. They've been following the situation since early this afternoon, just to ensure they give us minute-by-minute updates on how this unfolds and develops. But in terms of the police action so far, it has been tear gas, it has been the water cannon trucks, as the protesters refuse to relent on their position there on Outer Ring Road. And we'll also be giving you an update on where the Azimio team has reached. It is now exactly 5 p.m. on the dot. I had a question here on Twitter to you, Christine. Someone saying, I beg your pardon, where the president should wait for demonstrators at State House to receive the memorandum. How realistic that is, especially seeing how things could escalate to a point like this?
Well, when I gave that example, I was actually speaking to last Monday. I wasn't speaking to today because we lost that opportunity last Monday. And in using that analogy, what I intended to say was there's a way to deal with this in a more peaceful manner, in a way that actually acknowledges that there will be divergent views, that there will be dissent. And as the president of our nation, he must be open to those divergent views and that dissent, right? And in fact, if the process of picketing, of demonstrating, of protesting is facilitated, the expectation, as provided in law, is that police will then offer security to facilitate the enjoyment of that right, on the one hand. On the other hand, that they then have a responsibility, using their intelligence and working in collaboration with the protesters to identify criminal elements within those or amongst those protesters and call them out and ensure that they're held accountable. The law goes as far as I said earlier, being very specific. You must not carry stones, you must not carry weapons, you must not... The law is not saying that protests should look like this. This is not the constitutional...
You have an individual who has a stone in
waiting to wield a stone,
sling.
Right?
Yeah.
This is not the protest that the Constitution is speaking to. A peaceful protest is what the Constitution envisages, and it does require that the state security authorities take up their rightful place in ensuring that those demonstrations can be peaceful. In a situation where those demonstrations are peaceful, what is impossible about the president receiving a petition at State House? Nothing, absolutely. Nothing, absolutely, from where I sit, from the kind of democratic society that we want to see. And so my response would be, we must come to a place as a society where divergent views do not lead to death. If I disagree with you, then we talk about political violence. No. And similarly, that divergent views against the state does not result in the state then using state machinery to suppress those divergent views. That is not the democracy that our Constitution anticipated. And so we are speaking out, not because we speak for Azimio La Umoja coalition, but because we speak for the Constitution.
Correct.
And today it will be Azimio, tomorrow it will be us. Speaking out and agitating about one thing or the other. Just 2 weeks ago, we've had a situation in our country where we're debating about sexual minorities. Does that mean that if we go out to the street or to present a petition, we should be tear gassed?